Have you ever got into a fly fishing situation where you actually didn't know what knot to tie, what knot was the most appropriate knot for the given circumstance? There are really only 6 knots that you absolutely need to know for fly fishing in freshwater. For trout fishing, it doesn't mean that you can't learn a whole bunch of other ones, but these 6 are mission critical, and that's exactly what we're talking about on today's episode of Fly Fish University TV. Good morning and welcome back to another episode of Fly Fish University. My name is Jordan Ulrich. I'm your host, and our purpose, our mission, our vision, everything that we do is about shortening your fly fishing learning curve, making this wonderful sport more accessible and more enjoyable to the greatest number of people that we possibly can. Today we're talking 6 knots that are absolutely mission critical when it comes to trout fishing anyways. Now, I know that as we move into saltwater fishing, some more big game fishing, even salmon and steelhead, the knots that you're going to be fishing might be a little bit different and a little bit more complex. But the nice thing about trout fishing is that the knots that you need to know are actually quite simple. They're very easy to learn, they're very easy to tie. It's important first to know what each of these knots, what they are, and when, why, and where you're going to use them, because they do have a different purpose. Once you master these 6 knots, fly fishing becomes very easy when you can tie flies on, or you can add tippet, or you can build your own tapered leader without having to think about it. Getting to that place of unconscious competence is what we really want. Today, the first knot that we're going to talk about is the improved clinch knot. Now, the improved clinch knot is basically just a dressed up version of the fisherman's knot, or the clinch knot, or the cinch knot that some people would call it. The one thing that I like about it is that there's one extra step in the knot, okay? So I do find that the improved clinch knot, just going through the top loop again, makes the knot just a little bit stronger, and I find that it lessens its tendency and its ability to slip. That was the only thing with a standard clinch knot, or a standard fisherman's knot, or whatever you'd like to call it, is that if it's not seated perfectly, if the knot doesn't seat itself perfectly, then it really does have a tendency to slip sometimes. Okay, if you don't make enough wraps, if they don't seat properly on top of each other, then that tag end, all it has to do is slip through, and you basically get that curly, what they call a pigtail on the end of your leader or your tippet. So the improved clinch is a very nice knot. Now, one thing I will say about this is that as you get into thicker monofilament, again, this is not really applicable when we're trout fishing, but thicker monofilament above, say, 12-pound test, the improved clinch might actually be less efficient knot than the standard clinch. But for thinner tippet that we're going to be using for trout fishing, for example, okay, most of the time we're fishing, say, 3x, 4x, 5x tippet, anywhere in kind of that 8 to 4 or 5 pound test. The improved clinch knot, I think, is a bit more advantageous over top of just a standard clinch knot. So this is a knot that you're going to use when you're tying your fly on and you don't care whether it has whether it has the ability to hang vertically or whether it has a free swimming motion. So for example, with dry flies, I don't really care, they're not swimming in any way, right? So I will use an improved clinch knot when I'm tying dry flies on. The next knot that we're going to talk about, knot number 2, is a non-slip mono loop. And a non-slip mono loop is an awesome knot when you want that fly to be able to undulate freely. Okay, so let's say we're fishing a leech pattern or a streamer. The clinch knot, or the improved clinch knot, they're going to cinch right down to the eye of the fly, and the fly is almost going to plane through the water. Okay, so the nice thing about the non-slip mono loop is that it has a free swimming motion. Okay, if you're suspending a nymph or a pupal imitation or a larval imitation vertically, especially in still water, this is huge. You want to use this knot because it's going to allow the fly to hang vertically, suspend naturally underneath the strike indicator. Let's say that there are 10,000 chironomids hatching, and all of them have their head pointed directly towards the surface, and there's one of them that's hanging on a 45-degree angle. You see where I'm going here? You want that fly to hang naturally. You want it to hang like a natural pupa or a larva or a nymph that you're imitating. So the non-slip monoloop, use this all the time when I want the fly to swim freely or when I want the fly to hang freely. Now, unless we're talking, bigger game, saltwater, bonefish, permit, tarpon, all these other different species, which we're not, these are really the only 2 knots that I will use to attach the fly to the leader. So it basically comes down to one question you got to ask yourself: do I care how the fly is swimming? Do I care how the fly is hanging? If you don't, then you're going to go with the improved clinch, and if you do, then you're going to go with the non-slip mono loop. Okay, knot number 3. This is a great knot, is a double surgeon's knot. Okay, now you can use a double or a triple, but it's such a simple knot to tie, and the reason why it's so nice is because it's very, very fast. You can do it with, you don't have to be precise in any way. If you can tie your shoelaces, my shoes don't have shoelaces. If you can tie your shoelaces, then you can tie a double surgeon's knot. Okay, it's a very simple, or a triple surgeon's knot. Thinner tippet material, I would say maybe 5X or thinner. I would lean towards a triple surgeon's knot, but a double surgeon's knot is such a great knot, and it's meant for tying 2 pieces of tippet or leader to tippet of a similar diameter. Okay, so 6 pound to 6 pound, 8 pound to 8 pound, 3X to 4X, 4X to 5X. They're very, very similar diameters. Okay, if you're tying 2 irregular diameters, there are different knots that we can use. Sometimes this would be a topic for another day, but sometimes all you want to do is put like a little bumper piece in between the 2 of them. So if you're trying to tie 4X to 2X or 4X to 1X, maybe you put a piece of 3X in the middle of those 2, okay? And you can still use this double or triple surgeon's knot. I would use a double surgeon's knot for those. But what it's going to do is it's going to create a gradual taper down to that 4X, so you're not trying to tie the thin tippet to the thick tippet. Now, the double surgeon's knot, the only disadvantage to it is that you have to have 2 clean tag ends. So what this means is that you can't have a strike indicator, you can't have your swivel, split shot, 1 fly, 2 fly, 3 flies. You can't have anything on the end of your leader when you're going to tie this knot, because you actually have to pull that tag end through. You have to pull the tag end through the knot itself before you're actually going to pull all your tags down and cinch it tight. That's one disadvantage, is that you do have to clip off your whole setup if you're tying the double surgeon's knot. Okay, so moving into the next one, this is a great knot because it's beautiful when you look at it. When it seats down just perfectly, it's such an incredible knot to look at, and that is the blood knot. The blood knot was one of the first knots that I learned how to tie, and it drove me insane trying to figure it out, but it's really, really simple. It's actually a very easy knot to tie. The only thing is there's a little bit more of a precision that's required. So sometimes if you're fishing in a rocking boat, it's cold outside, or you just want to get things tied together quickly, can be a little bit, sometimes like you create this resistance. The harder you try to tie the knot, the harder it gets to tie on. So the blood knot is a really, really great knot, but it does take a little bit more practice to learn. Now, one beautiful advantage to the blood knot is that, let's just say you are fishing an indicator rig. Maybe you have 2 or 3 flies on there. Let's say above your indicator, between the fly line and the indicator, you find a wind knot, or we call them wind knots, not casting knots, because we don't want to take full responsibility for them. But let's just say that you find a wind knot in your leader, okay? So what you're gonna do is you're going to clip on either side of that wind knot. You definitely don't want to leave these in your leader at any point. There's no reason to leave them in. They weaken that material so much. By putting that little bit of a junction on there, it's totally useless. It's so easy to look at them at a casting knot and go, well, it's fine, I'll just leave it till the next fish, until the next fish is like a fish of a lifetime and you break it off because you were too lazy to change your leader. I've been there many times, so I'm not faulting you if this is one of your tendencies. But the nice thing about a blood knot, you're going to clip on either side of that wind knot, and you're going to throw the blood knot in really, really quickly. The nice thing about that versus the double surgeon's knot is that you're leaving everything intact. You don't need to take off your indicator, your swivel, your split shot, or your nymph rig, or whatever you're fishing. You don't need to clip anything off. You just cut, boom, both sides of that wind knot or that casting knot, and you're going to throw in that blood knot. It's super, super fast. It's very clean. It's such a nice, uniform, slim, just a gorgeous looking knot. Now, I had mentioned tying regular, consistent pieces of tippet together, 2 tippets of a similar diameter. And I will just say that in a situation where you're tying irregular diameters of tippet, sometimes an improved blood knot is a good option for something like this. Thin tippet to thick tippet, improved blood knot. I've used it a lot. It's a really, really nice knot. Moving on. Okay, and this is a really, really easy knot to tie once you get it. This one, again, just like a blood knot, definitely took me a bit of practice. This is a perfection loop. Okay, so the perfection loop, a lot of times you'll use this if you're making your own leaders. You're going to put a perfection loop at the very top of your leader. The reason for this is that it's a slim knot. Passes through the guides very easy. It's very uniform. It makes a very non-obtrusive little knot that can go in and out of the guides of the fly rod very easy. So even if you're building your own tapered leaders, let's say, and you're tying with, say, 20 or 25 pound test for a butt section, this is a really great knot because it's going to make it slim enough that it's going to go in and out of the guides by itself. Now, without hanging up too bad, the most important thing is that you're clipping that tag end down really, really tight once you've seated your perfection loop. Now, one thing that is important to note about the perfection loop is it is what we call a cutting knot. So the perfection loop doesn't always work as well with really thin leader or really thin tippets. It's just in my experience. So typically what I'll do is I'll use a double surgeon's loop. Okay, so I'll tie the double surgeon's knot in the top of my leader, or when I'm doing a loop-to-loop connection, if I'm using tippet that's thinner than 3x. Okay, anything thicker than 3x, I will use a perfection loop. And the last knot, you can also use the perfection loop with thicker tippet. You can actually use a perfection loop to tie your fly on too, which is super cool. It's not as easy to get the size that you want as the non-slip mono loop, but it is possible. The last one is a nail knot. Okay, now when I noticed that I didn't say Albright knot here because I think that a nail knot is more than sufficient for trout fishing. A lot of times when we're trout fishing, we're not really testing that connection between the fly line and the leader, or the fly line and the backing, as much as, let's say, in saltwater fishing, those knots become a little bit more vulnerable. So that's where we're going to use different knots. We might use a bimini twist, or a double bimini, or a spider hitch, or some of these other fancy knots. But a nail knot, a lot of times, is totally sufficient when you're tying your leader to your fly line, or you're tying your fly line to your backing. I hope that this makes sense. And to tie the nail knot is really easy if you have a nail knot tool. Okay, you can pick them up for less than $10 at pretty much any fly shop. You could probably find them online, I'm sure. I'll find a link and leave it in the description down below. You can absolutely find a nail knot tool. There's a lot of nippers now that come with a nail knot tool on the back of them, which is super cool. And if you're in a pinch, you can use a nail, because I think that that's where this started. You can also use things like a straw, and you can also tie a nail knot without a tool whatsoever, but that again is a topic for another day. I hope that this was of value to you. And again, this is just a reminder that we have our Fly Fishing Accelerator Workshop coming up March 23rd, 24th, 25th. This is going to be an awesome event. It's completely free. If you want to get on the right track for your fly fishing season in 2021, I would highly suggest attending this workshop. We're going to go over some of the most important things that you need to know to start removing some of that guesswork and just make fly fishing a more enjoyable experience. So I just want to say thank you so much. I'll leave a link down below. You can go to flyfishuniversity.com/accelerator and you can register for the workshop for free. There is a limited number of seats, but there's absolutely no charge for it. I'm very, very excited for this. I want to thank you for listening in, tuning in, watching, wherever you're coming from. It's so fun receiving messages from people all over North America and also all around the world saying that they enjoy our podcast and our YouTube channel and things like this. We're just starting out, so many, many exciting things to come from here. I want to say thank you, and I'll see you on Friday's episode of Q&A Friday.